All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Housing Addendum live Q&A. My name is Hayden Lau. I am the marketing coordinator for the Department of Housing and Residence Life. So to get started today, I just wanted to introduce you to our experts and share a little bit about the purpose for today's live Q&A. With us, we have Arian Bryant, Director for Residence Life and Education, and we have Meredith Varner, Associate Director for Occupancy Management. So our Q&A today is intended to cover important points and answer questions about the COVID-19 addendum to the Fall 2020 Housing Agreement. All residents are required to either acknowledge this addendum in the housing portal or cancel their housing for the Fall 2020. We are asking that this be completed by Monday, July 6th. So detailed information and several reminders have already been shared via email, and those messages are also located in your housing portal. And to access those messages, you would log into your housing portal, click on the menu icon in the upper left gold navigation bar. So we'll go ahead and open it up to Arian and Meredith to just go over some of the major points of the addendum and just an overview of it.
Arian, I think you're still on mute.
Here we go. I apologize for that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arian Bryant. I serve as the Director of Residence Life and Education here at the University of Central Florida in our Department of Housing and Residence Life. I am going to start the conversation by highlighting some key areas in our housing addendum that we would like to make our residents and our parents aware of. These are key points, and it doesn't capture everything in its entirety, but these are important points that we would like to share with you now. One, everybody in housing and residence life and our division and our university is going to do all that we can to ensure that your fall move-in experience is memorable, and your housing experience through the fall semester is exceptional. But we recognize that we are in challenging times, and these challenging times are challenging for each one of us in many, many different ways. We're doing our best to anticipate all of the different hurdles or challenges and opportunities to ensure that this is a wonderful experience for you, and we're taking a lot of things into consideration. The first thing we want to definitely communicate is that we are doing all that we can to ensure the well-being of both our residents and our staff members. But it is also important to note that we cannot guarantee a COVID-19 free environment. As part of our addendum, we clearly state that all the efforts and strategies that we're putting in place will not, with 100% effectiveness, eliminate COVID-19 presumptive cases or positive cases. So that's important to know as you make an informed decision with your choice to move on campus. The other thing is that we've initiated a number of different changes to reduce and mitigate the spread of COVID-19 throughout our residential communities. And some of these changes include modification and changes to our guest policy and guest privileges. Some of these changes include additional signage around and external to our residential communities that serve as constant reminders with respect to what guidance we're receiving from our campus and state health officials as it pertains to social distancing, washing hands, and just practicing behavior that's going to make sure that we're keeping our communities well and safe. In addition to that, we have taken some steps to change occupancy numbers in certain parts of our residential communities based upon guidance at different levels of our university. But essentially, all of these changes, everything that we're putting in place, from our move-in logistics, which is going to be largely touch-free. We're trying to develop, we're in the final stages of our plans on developing a move-in experience that's going to mitigate human interaction and be as touch-free as possible. So we are adhering to those social distance and safety and health guidelines. But essentially, at the very core of this, no matter what we put in place, no matter what we do as a department, as a division, as a university, we will only be as successful as our community members, to the extent that our community members, all of our community members, our staff members, our residents, adhere to the guidance that we'll be providing them before arrival and upon arrival. So it is essential, it is imperative that any information that is being sent out to residents and families before arrival and upon arrival when it comes to safety standards, social distancing, and just common sense when it comes to the information that's being provided by many health professionals on and off campus, that our community members, staff, and students are adhering to it. And I want to speak plainly. I want to speak to the audience. I want to speak to the parents. Many of us are parents, and all of us were students at some point. We see in the news, individuals, not all of our community members, individuals who are choosing to put themselves in positions that could probably expose them to COVID-19 unintentionally, and not fully giving thought to how that could potentially put a larger community at risk. So one of the things we really want to drive home here is that there is a shared responsibility to practice good behavior and respect all of the policies. And we're going to start social norming campaigns on campus, but it's up to parents and students to buy into that, to reinforce that, to support that, and hold their community members responsible in a civil and respectful way when they're doing things that's incongruent with the social distancing and health guidelines that we'll be putting out there. So we ask you for that assistance. We ask you for that support. And we're going to be working hard to make sure that we're giving clear directions, clear information to support our residents and our staff members. I wanted to share that with you, but as a result of living on campus, there is an expectation that students and parents understand there is an inherent risk, and we cannot guarantee a COVID-19 free environment. And it's going to be up to all of us to make sure that we stay healthy and that things are operating smoothly. Throughout the course of the semester, there will be a number of different engagements and engagement programs to make sure that our students and our residents are well taken care of and they feel a part of the community. So although it's a very different semester and we're in very different times, we want to try and replicate the experience as best as possible from previous move-ins, which have been very successful. So with that, I would like to turn the microphone over to Meredith, and she'll share some additional information with you.
Sure, thanks. And so Arian mentioned some of the changes to policies and things like that to work to have a safer environment. And one of those is that facial coverings are required for anyone on campus, and that we are enforcing that within housing, but that will be within classroom buildings and other locations as well. So anytime you are exiting your room, you do need to have a facial covering on. UCF is providing those, and we will have those at move-in for students, but we certainly recommend if you wanted to have more than one that you go ahead and, get that for yourself. And that is required. We will definitely be making sure that's the case. And we want you to encourage other folks to wear their facial coverings. If you see people without facial coverings, it's going to be a very important step to keeping a safer environment. Another thing that we're saying in the addendum is that we may be requiring COVID-19 testing and symptom checking. And so if you are acknowledging that addendum, you're agreeing that you will adhere to that when it's required. And so certainly that would be clearly communicated so that you're aware of when that's happening and what needs to be done, but that is something that you are agreeing to. Arian mentioned our visitor and guest policy is being adjusted. And so we are not allowing visitors and guests from outside the building to come in. Now, a quick caveat to that does not apply to move-in. You can still bring 2 individuals with you to move in to help you move in. We understand that it's difficult to move your larger items and things like that, and parents and family members would like to be involved with that process. And so certainly we understand that. But once you're in, we really need to keep guests out of the building. You can have 1 guest in your space who is from the building, but other than that, we need to keep that environment to no guests. And so that is a policy that's being acknowledged in the addendum. Some other items that are within the residence halls may be a little bit restricted. For example, community kitchens, lounges, and elevators and things like that may have limits of how many folks can be in there at the same time. And that's certainly for your safety as well, so that we don't have people crowding too close together, and can help prevent some spread of germs and things like that. And then, as you may be aware, the university is going to all remote instruction after Thanksgiving and through finals. And so housing will remain open during that time. So that's very important to note, that if you do want to stay on campus through Thanksgiving, through the last week of classes and finals, you are absolutely welcome to do that. You do not have to return home during that period of remote instruction, and housing is open. I think that covers the major points, but we certainly want to encourage you, if you have not yet read and acknowledge the addendum, to read it carefully. If you have family members or friends or loved ones who are involved in your housing and education decisions, read that with them to make sure that you understand what's there, so that you can go in fully informed into what we're going to be looking at for the fall semester.
Thank you both for that overview of the addendum. So we did receive some questions. Thank you to those of you who did submit some questions here for us to address. So we'll go ahead and get started. We have tried to group them so we can answer your questions. A lot of you have the same questions. So we'll start off with the first category of move-in questions and people coming in from out of state. So our first question is from Mandy, and she asks, when will our students be able to select their move-in date? Trying to plan our schedule as we are traveling from out of state.
Yeah, that's a good question. We want to make those available to you as soon as possible. There are still some details being ironed out of what timeframes those are going to look like from the 8th to the 23rd, and we want to make sure that we are doing that in partnership with our student health services, with parking services, with the police, with all the folks involved in that. So we're still ironing out a few details, but we're looking to get those available to you in the housing portal as soon as possible. We do know that folks are coming from out of state and need to plan. It's also important to note there is a 15-day window. And so while August 8th is coming up pretty quickly, you do not need to move in on August 8th. You have really through the 23rd to make that appointment. So there is a little bit of time to make that those plans. That being said, for our folks who are coming from very far away or who have something that's completely inflexible, and you're not able to get an appointment when you need it, please contact us. We're interested in working with you. We want to make sure that we're helping our students get here and have a positive experience. And so do reach out if there's something we can help you with. But again, those should be available in the portal as soon as possible. And of course, we will email those out as soon as they're ready. For our folks that are in our academic main agreement, room selection does start next week. And so you do have to have a room selected in order to have a move-in appointment. And so that would take place after you are selecting your room. The reason for that is that move-in appointments are staggered by floor and building so that we don't have hundreds of people passing through the same main door or trying to get in the same elevator at the same time. We want to make sure that's a physically distant process for you so that you are and your family who's helping you move in have less contact with other individuals. And so that's the reason for the long time frame of move-in and the staggered appointment times.
Thank you. So this next question, still on that topic, do you have additional information about how move-in will go? We've seen that move-in will take place from August 8th through August 23rd, and students will make appointments throughout that time period. When the portal opens for appointments, will it be simultaneous? Will early move-in fees apply? So a couple questions in there if you guys could address those.
I can take the easy ones first and then give Arian the hardball question there. So The appointments will launch. They will be available, but if you're in a specific floor or building, you are only having access to that floor or building's appointment times, if that makes sense. And so, for example, someone who is living in the towers will not be able to make an appointment to move into Nike. So they're separated out in that way. Early move-in fees are not applied because we know that this is required in order to keep everyone safe. And so those are the kind of administrative questions, but I'll let Arian take the how will the move-in go, if you don't mind.
Not a problem. So for many of you, or if this is your first time moving your student into university housing, it is a big experience, right? So we're at a big university and we have a very, very big housing program with many different residential communities spread out geographically. So it takes a lot of planning with multiple partners, and Meredith actually cited many of them that we will be working closely with: UPD, parking services, third-party vendors to help us with moving people's belongings, our staff themselves. But traditionally in a move-in process, it's created in a way where there are staging areas. So sequentially, we know exactly what the experience should look like before arrival, as soon as parents and students hit the campus, where they should be directed to, what's going to be their first stopping area, what's going to be their second stopping area, and how we're going to conclude that move-in check-in process so that they can start enjoying living in the halls and attending some of the programs that happen during Welcome Week, which are going to be virtual moving into the fall. But to give you kind of a sense of what we're looking at, because of what because of what we're dealing with, COVID-19, as many of you know, we want to do all that we can to mitigate or control the spread of the contagion, right? So that's going to change some of our sequential steps, not greatly, but it's going to change some of our sequential steps as to what parents and students should expect upon arrival and how they're going to flow through the process. The overarching plan is to create, and we're still finalizing this, and we're very close, to create a check-in, move-in experience that, one, is based upon calculations. So mathematical calculations of residents per building, residents per floor, how many people we're going to have at each check-in location, so we can control for congestion, not only at check-in stations, but also once you receive your card and you receive your key and you're actually moving your belongings into your residence hall. Many of our residence halls have elevators, so we have to take that in consideration. So we have mathematical calculations that have determined that we need this 15-day window, and each day there's going to be a certain amount of appointments per community that we can max out, that we feel comfortable and safe after running it by our campus health professionals to control for congestion on a very, very busy day. Once you arrive, there are going to be some additional elements that you have not seen at previous move-ins, or if you move students in at other universities. We're going to have a testing site. As of right now, we don't have that completely finalized, but we're very close. But all of our students who will be returning to us will be tested for COVID-19 upon arrival. That's, at this point in time, that is looking like that's going to be the first stop in the process. So you're going to receive this information on where you need to report to once you arrive to campus to receive this COVID test. And after you receive the COVID test, you will know then where you're directed to go to your check-in area to receive check-in materials such as goodie bags, your electronic student cards if you're a new resident, to encode your cards if you're a returning resident, and any hard keys that may go to rooms such as bedrooms. We're developing this process in a way where we're trying to mitigate as much human interaction and create that distance that's in adherence or in accordance to the guidelines that we have been given. So we're very close to that right now. What I want to share about move-in as we work on these logistics and we finalize these plans that will be provided to you step by step in detail of what you should expect and what you should do, is to emphasize this point. This plan works very well when everybody is adhering to timelines. So I would encourage all families to plan accordingly on those days. And we recognize a bunch of things can come up. You have car difficulty. Some things are outside of your control. But to the best of your ability, you want to, once you've signed up for your housing assignment, and then step 2 is to sign up for your move-in appointment, make sure that you're creating enough time that you're going to arrive on campus so you can get to your first check-in spot location on time. This is going to help us with congestion of cars and making sure that people are flowing through as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So that's 1. 2, we recognize that there's going to be some differences in terms of the amount of assistance we can provide to families when they're moving belongings in. So we encourage residents, particularly, we say this for every move-in, but no matter how many move-ins I've worked, there's always, a very excited family or student that arrives with a trailer full of belongings. And we work with students and we understand, and we have ways to deal with those oversized vehicles. But in this instance, it's imperative that you're really bringing all what you really need, right? Because you want to make sure that you can move into your residence halls with the 1 or 2 people that you're bringing with you as quickly as possible. So making sure that you're scheduling properly, you're giving yourself enough time to arrive on campus, to arrive at that first check-in station at your scheduled time, and making sure that what you're bringing with you is going to be such that it's going to allow you and the people that you bring with you, and we're limiting it to 2, to move in as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Upon arrival, we're also going to be giving guidance that we would like people kind of to monitor and control for their movement in and around the community. Remember, we're going to be testing all residents as they arrive to campus, right? So shortly after that testing, we will know the results of those tests. But in the meantime, if you move in on the 8th or the 11th before classes start, because there's going to be some time before classes start, we want you to be really careful about interacting with others and really adhering to those social distancing and safety and health guidelines, because we want to be really cognizant of the fact that we're testing you and your results are still out there. So, leaving your room when absolutely necessary, and making sure you're not congregating in spaces and adhering to that 6-foot social distancing. So our move-in experience is going to look very similar. It's going to have some additional elements, and largely you're going to see that it's going to be as touch-free as possible. We're still thinking through details when it comes to the things that we really love doing, like giving out ICs. We love giving out ICs. We love giving out waters, but we have to think critically about how are we going to deliver those amenities and those things we love to deliver without while also adhering to those social distancing guidelines and maintaining as much of a touch-free process as possible. So that's a little bit about moving. Those are the logistics. You will receive detailed instructions on what that experience will be and what you need to do before and upon arrival.
All right, thank you very much. And our next question on this topic, my son is a marching knight. He needs to be in his dorm by August 13th for camp. We just want to request early move-in like usual. How is that going to look for students who do have, different things they need to be on campus early for? And then just to follow up on that as well, is there a cost for that COVID-19 test that is going to be given upon move-in?
So in terms of the question with the marching knights, which very exciting to be involved in our marching band, so that's awesome. We would encourage you to select a move-in appointment from between August 8th and August 13th in order to arrive in time for your for your marching band camp. We suspect that the earlier appointment times may not be quite as in demand as maybe a little bit later, and so we think that our marching band folks will be able to get in there and get the times that they need. And so we are aware of those dates that the marching band camp folks do need to arrive by. There may be other early arrival reasons. I'm not sure if all of those are taking place this year with the changes, like different retreats or camps that might have taken place in the past may not be taking place. But we would encourage you to sign up for an earlier move-in time to make sure you can get here during the time that you're able to. In a typical year, we would not be starting move-in this early, and so we have quite a bit of time before most of the typical events and activities start taking place. In terms of the cost for the student, most insurances will cover this, and we're going to have more information from our student health services on what that looks like. Arian, I don't know if you have any other details that you want to have there.
No, Meredith, that was perfect. Right now, the cost and who will incur the cost, that's still being decided, and that hasn't been finalized yet. As of right now, there are many health insurance programs that will cover the cost, but this is the first of two housing forms that we're going to have. And then the second one, we're going to go into greater detail, and that's one of the topic areas we will cover, because at that point in time, we should have some additional information to share with our parents and our residential community.
All right, thank you guys. So we're going to switch gears a bit and talk a little bit more about changing your term in spring housing. So Meredith, could you give us an overview on what that is going to be like?
Sure thing. Yeah, so we have received a lot of questions both with this forum and just via email and phone calls and other social media areas about spring housing and what does that look like and how can I get spring housing and am I prioritized for spring housing? And so I will say there are a lot of unknowns right now because this year I think has been a lot of unknowns for all of us in many respects. And so the spring housing application will open in early October. And so if you are choosing to cancel right now and cancel your fall spring agreement or fall spring summer agreement, you would then reapply for spring housing if you'd like to be considered at that time. We don't know how much space we will have in a typical year. I could tell you about how many spaces we have every spring, but this year has not obviously been a typical year. And so we're not able to really make any guarantees at this point. We will do our best to prioritize incoming freshman students, to prioritize top 10 Knights, to prioritize any students that may need to be waitlisted for fall housing. But right now, without knowing what that cancellation rate is going to look like, how many folks will be staying from fall to spring, what does that look like? I'm not able to say for sure we'll be able to house every freshman or we'll be able to house every top 10 Knight. So we would have folks start applying in early October, and then from there, hopefully have some more details about what those spring spaces are going to look like.
Thank you, Meredith. So we have a question on this topic from Laura. She asked, can a student sign up for academic housing and pay for it? And if they change their mind about staying on campus, keep the dorm, but take their online classes from home? Essentially holding on to the dorm in hopes in-person classes happen for the spring and they can return then.
Oh, so that's a good question and very strategic question there. Part of our regular process when after fall move-in is that after we get to that first Friday of classes, we determine who has not checked in. And we then contact those folks to see what is going on, if they are going to move in or not. If they are a no-show, we do go ahead and cancel that housing agreement. It is at a reduced rate, so they don't end up paying the full rent, but we do want to make space for other folks who need housing. And so typically during the first week of classes, we still have a wait list of students who want housing, and we want to find out who is not using that housing for the fall so that we can then give space to students who need housing at that time. So essentially, if you were to try to enact that plan at a certain point during the end of the first week of school or beginning of the second week, we would be canceling you as a no-show and likely refilling that space with someone from the wait list.
Thank you, Meredith. So adjusting our topic again, we have a lot of questions about the addendum details and some COVID-19 restrictions. So I'll just start off on some of those questions. Alyssa asked, how can I cancel the agreement if I already agreed to the addendum, but I just found out that my classes will be online? Am I still going to be charged with the cancellation fee?
That's a good question. Up through the 6th, when the form is due, if you change your mind and you do not want to acknowledge that addendum anymore, you can contact us in writing via email to ask that the form be reset for you. We'll reset it for you, and then you can go in and complete it with the cancellation instead. If you have canceled and want to reverse it, that is a little bit more complicated because money may have been refunded at that point, or bookings may have been canceled. But if that is a decision you're looking at, contact us. We'll see what we can do to help you. So, short answer, yes, we can reset the form for you if you've already agreed to it. Cancellation is a little bit harder to reverse, but let us know.
Thank you, Meredith. So Jesse asked, how will the restrictions regarding guests in the dorms be enforced? Is it on the honor system?
So that's, Jesse, that's an excellent question. I'll return back to where I started. Our efforts to keep our entire community well, to make sure that we're doing all that we can to control for and mitigate the spread of COVID-19 within our residential communities is really going to be largely contingent upon shared responsibilities, that of housing and residence life, putting out good information, good directions, supporting students, but also the behaviors of all of our community members. So you asked the question, is it going to be on the honor system? Many of our, the truth of it is many of our residential communities are not like the traditional residence halls that you may see in the movies or on television. These are apartment style communities that have multiple points of entry, or they don't have that traditional front desk that's at one point of entry that's monitoring everybody who's coming in and exiting. We have it in one community, but the rest of our communities, we do not. So we're going to do our best as a housing and residence life staff to monitor and pay attention to all community members who's entering in, who's exiting. And when we find someone who is not adhering to wearing a mask or adhering to our guest policies, we're going to have conversations with them, and we're going to do all that we can to modify that behavior. If that behavior continues, then our responses will escalate, which can include, but not limited to, student sanctioning, people being asked not to return to the halls. And in rare cases, and we don't want to go in this direction, but I need to say it, if we have people who are willfully not paying attention to policies that we've set based upon the guidance we receive from our campus health professionals, they may be in danger, or that they may face losing their housing privileges. Now, I believe that's going to be very rare cases. I hope we have 0 cases of that. I hope that, a conversation is going to be sufficient in modifying behaviors and getting someone to understand their behavior not only affects them, but it affects others. So when it comes to guest policies, very similar to like a normal year, if there's a guest policy violation, as you know, residence life staff members, my RAs that work for me, are not in every apartment or every housing unit at all times. More often than not, typically, we're told about this after the fact, then we look into it, and then we have conversations with individuals who may have been in violation of our guest policy expectations. And that's going to be very similar this year. There are going to be some people that we may see in the moment, but largely it's going to be up to our residents, our community members, to respectfully and civilly remind their community members, their apartment mates, their roommates, what the policies are. Right. And we encourage them to have those good conversations because it's good. But in the event that a resident is uncomfortable or they've been unsuccessful in having those conversations when it comes to any type of policy violation, namely guests, we will have information and instructions up in and around all communities on who those residents can get in contact with, so that residence life staff members can engage and have that conversation with said individuals. So it's going to be a shared responsibility. It's going to be a community effort. It's going to be community standards where we're reminding and we're supporting each other and adhering to these guidelines and these expectations, because it's in everyone's best interest, and we want everybody to enjoy housing for the full academic year.
Thanks, Arian. Kind of a follow-up question on the COVID-19 tests that will be administered upon move-in. Do we know what type of test it is?
Yeah, I can take that. I can't speak too articulately to it because this is not my area of expertise, but I was in conversation with some of our campus health professionals, and the specific test that they're going to be using, which is also going to be used during our move-in process, is a PKR test. And from what I understand, it tests for antigens or antibodies, but that's the extent of what I know. It's called a PKR test, and that's the test that we're going to be using on campus.
Thanks, Arian.
Yes, ma'am.
So next question is about cleaning. Roseanne asked, will weekly cleaning of common areas in the apartments still take place? If so, how will it be ensured that no viruses are being spread by cleaning equipment and personnel going from dorm to dorm?
So Meredith, if I may, I'll jump in on this one too, and feel free to fill in any gap areas or blanks. That is a great question. So we recognize that our cleaning schedules throughout all of our residential communities is going to be an important strategy in making sure that we are eliminating any and all germs, right? Not just COVID. But in this time, we recognize that it's even more important, just because of how communicable this disease can be, according to the science that we have and that we adhere to. So there will be cleaning schedules, and there will be increased cleaning schedules in common areas and throughout our residential communities. This is going to be our attempt to make sure that these areas are as clean and well maintained as possible. But we do this throughout a regular year, but there's going to be an increased effort, an increased cleaning schedule throughout our residential communities. And that's something that not only Housing and Residence Life is responsible for, because we have our internal housekeepers. We work very closely with our partners and our public-private partnerships to communicate these needs. And they have been very receptive and understanding of the need for increased cleaning schedules in our common areas and throughout our residential communities. So that's an excellent question. And that is definitely a strategy we will be following through with for the entire academic year.
Thanks, Arian. We have a follow-up question about cleaning in the Towers community. It's from Monique. She said, pre-COVID, Tower residents did not receive weekly cleanings of the bathroom and vacuuming. Will that be changed now? And will Towers residents start receiving some kind of cleaning service?
So that's a great question, Monique. I'm currently in conversations with our partners over in the Towers and working with them closely. They're developing a cleaning schedule that's going to be that's going to be elevated from their normal cleaning schedule. I can't share the details because I don't have those right now. But again, this is the first of 2 housing forums, and I am looking forward to sharing more specific information when it comes to cleaning schedules in specific communities at our next forum, or another staff member will share that with you.
Thank you. So Jennifer has a question about how our quarantine spaces will work. She asked, can you explain for us how the housing set aside for quarantine will work? Who needs to use this? Is it for you or if you've been exposed or only if you've tested positive? So if you could, someone go into a little more detail on that.
So I'll give broad strokes with our quarantine and isolation plan. Over the last couple of months, looking at best practices, looking at our sister universities in the state, outside of the state, what are people doing? We're regularly on phone calls, we're attending webinars, we're having Skype phone calls with our colleagues across our state and across our nation to see exactly, their plans, and we're sharing ideas and sharing approaches. With respect to quarantine and isolating, our plan is very similar to what other universities are doing. There are going to be some slight differences because every residential community is a little bit different with the structure of their buildings. But essentially, if we become aware, and this is important, people are going to, it's important that our community members are communicating their COVID-19 status to a housing and residence life professional or to student health services as soon as that status changes. If they felt like they've come in contact with someone, if they feel like they're suffering symptoms, or if they're positive, because that then sets off a number of different actions that we have now put in place to support those that particular student or students, and also the larger community at hand. Those individuals who have been identified as requiring quarantine. Quarantining is very simply put, somebody who may have had exposure, who may be having some symptoms. We're going to leave those individuals in their respective assignments. And we're going to work with that student to make sure that they're tested. And then we're going to tell them that they really need to mitigate their travel in and around the building. And we're going to support them through that process. For those residents who have received a test back and they are COVID-19, we have dedicated spaces, single spaces, throughout all of our residential communities, and making sure that there are a number of different things that are important to us. One, that these spaces are well outfitted with everything that the isolated resident is going to need. There are going to be some things that the resident needs to bring with them themselves. Two, that we're controlling for and respecting confidentiality, right? So that's important to us. So we have these isolation spaces for those who test positive for COVID-19 throughout our residential communities. And those students will be a housing and residence life professional, more than likely myself, will be contacting those students directly and having a conversation with them, providing them with directions on what the next steps will be for the duration of the time they need to be in isolation, which is going to be 14 days. And additional information will be shared with those residents during that time to make sure that we're supporting them as best as possible. So.
If I can add something really quickly too, if a student does test positive and prefers to go home or to some other location than our isolation space, they are welcome to do that. We just want to know where they're going so that we can track that and ensure that they don't return within that 14-day period. So if there is somewhere else you would rather be, we certainly don't want to, keep you on campus if you would prefer to do that.
So Meredith, thank you so much for that. That is a very important point. If someone tests COVID-19 positive, during my conversation with them, one of the first questions I'm going to ask is there somewhere you can isolate off campus? Are you able to go home? For those students who are unable to go home or isolate off campus elsewhere, yes, we have these rooms that are dedicated to support these students. But ideally, if someone is able to isolate off campus or go home for that 14-day period, that is something that we're going to recommend. Now, we recognize that's not going to be an option for some, mainly our students who may live, long distances away from the UCF. So we understand that. But ideally, if one can isolate off campus or at home, that's going to be a question we ask. And then, depending on the answer, we'll move forward with support and next steps. Thank you, Meredith.
Thank you both. So we have similar questions from two folks, Rebecca and Darnelli. So Darnelli is asking, will all of the dorms have reduced capacity? And Rebecca is asking specifically about Rosen, if Rosen is going to be reducing capacity. So if you could address that, please.
Sure. So any facility that has apartments, so our Rosen Apartments, Towers at Knights Plaza, Northview, Lake Claire Apartments, the apartments in Nike and Hercules, the suites in Neptune that have private rooms, all of those remain at our typical occupancy. So Rosen, a 4-bed, 2-bath apartment will have 4 people in it. At Northview, a 2-bed, 2-bath apartment will have 2 people in it, and so forth. Where we are reducing occupancy is on some floors in some buildings of the shared rooms in Nike, Hercules, and Libra. We are not doing that in every shared room, just in about 450 of them to bring down the overall population in those floors and buildings. All of our shared rooms have enough space where the beds can be placed far enough away that you can have enough space as needed for physical distancing. And so it is being done, the occupancy reduction, to reduce the overall occupancy of some of those larger communities and buildings. And so there are some floors in Nike, some floors in Hercules, and some floors in the Citrus, Sumter, and Flagler buildings in Libra that are being reduced, where double rooms are being converted to single rooms. And when we say converted, we're basically just not filling the other space. The furniture does stay in there. We don't have anywhere to put 450 sets of extra furniture. And so it would be 2 people in a 4-person suite. So 1 person in one room, 1 person in the other, sharing the restroom for those reduced occupancy spaces. And for our folks that are going through room selection throughout July, that will be clearly labeled so that you can see the difference between a reduced occupancy or converted single and a regular double room.
Thank you, Meredith. And kind of a follow-up on that, can you address the LLC occupancy for our living learning communities?
Sure. So for our LLCs that are in spaces where there are shared rooms, so for example, Excel or Nursing at Nike or Learn, those will remain in shared rooms so that those LLCs can retain the number of folks that they would normally have and retain that community that they would normally set up. I believe that our partners who work with the programs and tutoring and other things offered through those LLCs will be working to offer a lot of those options virtually, since it may not be possible to get together a group of, say 30 residents into a small lounge like it might have been in, pre-COVID times. And so that would be adjustments that will be communicated to students as they're getting up to speed on their LLC adventures.
Thank you. So Anne Marie is asking, with the housing deadline and addendum being July 6th, we still don't know what room we will be in. How do we recommend one would decide if they don't know the circumstances of the room?
Sure, that's a really good question. And I imagine, Anne Marie, that you are in our academic main agreement, since that's the agreement that has not yet been able to go through room selection. And so that agreement covers all the rooms in our Apollo, Libra, Hercules, Nike, Lake Claire, and Neptune communities. And so what I would say is, to make your decision, consider that you could have a room in any of those facilities. You could be in a Neptune suite, you could be in a Lake Claire apartment, you could be in a Libra shared room, you can be in Apollo shared room. And so if you feel that you're not able to live in any of those facilities, then it may be wise to go ahead and submit that cancellation. Now, the penalty-free cancellation for our academic year folks, that goes up through July 6th if they choose not to acknowledge the agreement. From July 6th through July 17th, the cancellation fee is $250, so you lose the prepayment at that point. So there is a little bit of less expensive flexibility, if you will, during that time frame, if you are still looking to make that decision based on what type of room you're able to sign up for.
All right, thank you, Meredith. So before we kind of switch gears in our topic, last question for this one. So I think we already addressed Jennifer's question of, will students living in dorms be tested when moving in? And then if you are tested, when will you need to quarantine until you get your test results back? Arian, I know you touched a little bit on this earlier, but do you want to real quick address kind of quickly on that?
Yeah, very quickly. Yes, all of our residents will be tested upon arrival back to campus. This will happen at check-in, and we are asking some of the guidance that we'll be sending out, instructions to our residents before they arrive, that we're going to ask them to, we're referring to it as like a soft quarantine, where they want to monitor their movement in and around the building until we're sure of their test results. So it's really just paying extra close special attention to all the education and guidance that you'll have to adhere to throughout the entire year anyway.
All right, thank you. So kind of switching gears to some questions on roommate groups. So Kelly is asking, my son is a top 10 Knight, but some of the roommates in his group are not. Will they still be able to room together if they are on the wait list? So that's a couple different questions kind of in there. Meredith, I don't know if you kind of just want to address part of that.
I can try without knowing Kelly's specific situation. It might be a little bit difficult. But so students who are in a waitlist status currently are not able to use the roommate matching section of the housing portal. And so while they might be outside of the housing, just communicating separately that they intend to live together, they are not able to form a group and actually go through room selection and assign themselves together per our typical process in the housing portal. So I'm not sure if that answers her question. So I would encourage her maybe to send us some more details if that's needed, since the students who are in a waitlisted status are not able to do the roommate matching and go through room selection.
Thanks, Meredith. So a lot of these roommate questions are pretty specific to some people's specific situations. So I'm just trying to find something that could answer some general questions for everyone. Terry is asking if we will be able to accommodate roommate requests, and then will his or her son have to go through orientation before being assigned housing?
Sure. So orientation is not required in order to receive housing. You do have to complete a housing agreement. And so I would say if you have not done that at this point, you would be going on to a wait list unless you're applying for our Union West housing at the downtown campus, which does still have some available space. Will housing be able to accommodate roommate requests? That's without knowing the specific situation, that's very broad. And so if a student does have a confirmed agreement and has and is able to roommate match within the portal, then typically we're able to get most of those. You would go through room selection and one person from the group would select the rooms for the entire group in a suite or apartment. One thing I'm seeing into some of the questions is if I'm in a roommate group or if I have a room that people have already signed up for the other spaces and someone chooses to cancel because they're not going to come, maybe their classes are all online and they're making a different choice, will I get a different roommate? And the answer to that is yes. At this point, if room selection is over for your specific area, for example, Towers and Rosen, room selection is over, we would be assigning someone from the staff, someone from our staff would then be making room assignments to those open spaces that come up from cancellations.
Thank you, Meredith. Kind of a follow-up on that. If the roommate group leader who selected the space for the roommates, if they decide to not live with us on campus anymore, does that affect the roommates in the group in any way?
Good question. Once you have been assigned to the room, somebody canceling out does not affect it. Your room booking will stay the same, even if someone from your group or even if the person who selected the spaces chooses to cancel their housing. That does not then carry over to you once your booking is made. The only thing that person had any authority to do was to make that booking for you. Once it's there, it's up to you to cancel or not.
Thank you. Debbie is asking how it will work to pick rooms with the updated occupancy adjustments that we are making, and how will people go about getting a roommate group if some of the kids don't go for fall? Sorry for the last part of the question, I don't really follow, but for the first part of the question with the updated occupancy.
Sure. So when it's a little bit hard to visualize, but when you go through room selection in the housing portal, there's like these little tiles that show you the room, and it's got some details about the room. For example, it might say Sumter 101 A, and then it would tell you this is a a shared room in a suite. And if it's a converted room, it would say converted single in bold letters there so that you can see that that's the case. And you would only see one space in that room as opposed to two that would normally be there. So if you were looking to live together in that suite with one other person, you would sign up for both rooms in that suite. And the second, like the bed space of the shared room is not, the second one's not there. So it's just simply not available to even be selected. And then how do kids get out of roommate groups if some kids don't go for fall? So when you go through room selection, it's going to ask you to verify your roommate group. And at that point, if someone is no longer coming and they've been canceled, they will have been removed from the roommate group. If you know they're not coming and you want to remove them from the group so that you can then go through room selection with a smaller set of people, you can do that at that time as well.
Thank you, Meredith. And kind of last question on this topic. I think we touched on it already, but can you just go over quickly if someone if they have a confirmed housing status, but they haven't received their appointment yet, kind of when that will be coming out?
Sure. So we will be doing the academic main is the last group to go through room selection, and that is because we've had to do the occupancy reduction and wait a little bit of time for folks to do these voluntary cancellations. And so mid next week is when we anticipate sending out those appointment times for room selection, and that will go on for a couple of weeks because, as you can imagine, to get thousands of freshmen through that process does take a little bit of time. We want to make sure that our housing portal can support that and our staff can support them customer service wise. So those appointment times will go out. If you're in a roommate group, we recommend that the person with the earliest appointment time be the one to make that selection for your group.
Thank you, Meredith. So switching topics to application statuses and the wait list. A few questions. Mary asked, her son is on the wait list. Should he still sign the addendum?
So that one's got a couple of answers depending on what type of student Mary's son is. If your son is a returning resident who is in our lottery waitlist pool, he should sign the addendum in case we're able to offer him a space from the waitlist pool of the lottery. If your son is an incoming freshman who put his name on the waitlist after we were full in those housing agreements, he is not able to sign the addendum right now. If we're able to make a housing offer to him, he would sign the addendum at that point. So if we say to, hey, Mary's son, we got a space for you. It's August 1st. You want to take this space? And he says, yes, I want to take the space. He's going to go into the housing portal. He's going to acknowledge he accepts that offer. He's going to sign the terms and conditions for that housing agreement, and he's going to sign the addendum at that same time.
All right, thank you, Meredith. So can you go over a bit? We have a few questions about the wait list and how long you might be on the wait list and just some information about that, please.
Sure. So as I mentioned before, in talking about spring housing, this year is very different. And so this fall is very different for us as well. In a typical year, I could tell you, yeah, by early August, we'll be offering to the wait list. We don't know if that will be the case. It's possible that we may have to administratively waitlist some people next week who do have completed agreements. We're waiting to see how many voluntary cancellations we receive through this addendum process. And if we don't reduce our occupancy in the academic main agreement type by enough to accommodate the reduced occupancy, we will have to administratively waitlist some folks. And so those would be the first people that we would look to slot in as we get further cancellations in July and August. Once we have gotten through that pool, then we will move to the waitlist of students who place their name on the waitlist after the agreement was closed. So I know that's very kind of gray. And so essentially what I encourage families and students to do is pick a personal deadline past which you're not comfortable not knowing about your housing if you're on this wait list. And you might say, you know what, I can wait till July 15th, but I really need to know something by then. Or you might say, well, you know what, I live close by that I could commute if I needed to. I'm going to just wait through the first week of classes and see if they can get me in. That really is... Sorry, this message just popped up and it distracted my train of thought. I apologize. So that's really the advice that I would have for families and students that are trying to decide if they wanted to sign an off-campus lease, is that at this point, there's so much up in the air. We can't say we'll be able to let you know for sure by X date. And so you would want to determine that personally for you based on all the other factors that you have to consider that might be unique from someone else.
Thank you, Meredith. Sorry about that. I clicked something by mistake. So looks like those are the pre-submitted questions that we have. We've made it through those. And we are coming near the end of our time. If either of you have any last things you'd like to say or share with everyone, I do thank you both for your time and for answering all the questions that we have. So.
You know, I'll end with this. I'll say we're working really hard to make sure that the move-in experience is going to be wonderful. It's going to be safe. It's going to be memorable. In addition to having a fabulous full semester, but it's going to be shared responsibility, and we're going to have to work together to make sure that we're keeping the entire community safe and healthy and whole. So we look forward to your arrival.
Thanks, Arian. All right, if we did not get to your question today, feel free to email us at housing@ucf.edu. And thank you all for joining us today. Hope you have a great rest of your day and a great holiday weekend.